Hello and welcome to the VFM Podcast. I'm here today with Shona Wylie, who is the co-founder of Future in Mind. It's a company which helps leaders and teams transform how they work together with a strong focus on something called psychological safety. Shona has a wealth of experience in global HR, organizational design and executive leadership, and her career spans international work with Volvo, as well as strategic leadership and executive coaching. So we're very pleased to have Shona with us today. Shona, you're actually our first sort of non-VFM guest on our podcast, so we're very pleased to have you. And what we're going to do is we're going to sort of split this into almost two episodes. And the first is really to sort of look at the concept of psychological safety, what psychological safety is. Now, I have to admit, when this was first introduced to me, or someone said, this is Shona's going to come and talk to VFM about psychological safety, I thought, oh dear, what's going on here? Are we all going to have our brains tested or something, or what is it? So could you just sort of say a little bit about what psychological safety is for us, Shona, and introduce the idea for us?
Sure, no problem. I don't think you're the first person, Adam, to have that reaction, and certainly many people that I talk to have similar reactions. So psychological safety has actually been around for a long time, since the kind of 1950s and 60s, when there was initially some leadership thinkers talking about the way that teams interact with each other. But it was probably about 20 odd years ago that Professor Amy Edmondson started to make it a bit more popular, because she was doing a study, and she's a professor at Harvard Business School, and she wanted to study medical teams in hospitals, and she wanted to work out whether the medical teams that were higher performing actually made less medication errors, so errors in giving out different medications. So she wanted to work out if it was basically high performing teams, less medication errors. So she went about her research, and her team did lots of interviews and focus groups and data collection, as you can imagine. And she got her data. And when she started looking at her data, she was like, oh yeah, my hypothesis is right, because the skew was to, yes, there's what it looked like was, yeah, my hypothesis is right. However, when she then looked at the data a bit deeper, she noticed that the high-performing teams actually had more medication errors. And she was a bit like, oh, no, actually the skew that I thought was right actually isn't right. And that's not what I thought it was going to be, because I would expect high-performing teams to have less medication errors. So then what she had to do was think, oh, yikes, I'm going to have to go back and look at some of this data a bit deeper. So off she went, and she decided, yeah, I've got this wrong, because the medication errors were high in high-performing teams because they actually reported more errors. And the lower-performing teams still had the same amount of medication errors, but they didn't report as much. So that's really where the concept came from. But when it then, so she had written up the paper, and that was about 20 odd years ago. But it's become even more popular since Google got a hold of it and started looking. They again were looking at, why are we a very successful company? Why do we have teams that are high performing and low performing? What is the makeup of these teams? So they decided to look at, well, I think it will be the makeup of the team. So it will be maybe some extroverts, there'll be some different backgrounds, there'll be different experiences. So let's look at what makes up a perfect team. But when they did their research, and they studied 180 teams across Google, and what they found was it wasn't actually the makeup of the team, it was how the team interacted with each other. So they were, again, surprised at their research findings. So they had to go away and think, well, has anybody else found this? And then that's when Amy's research was then found, and they're like, this is what it is. This is psychological safety is at the heart of our teams that are high performing. So since then, the word psychological safety has become more and more popular within working world. And yes, there are a lot of misunderstandings about it, but that's really where the concept came from. And Amy describes it as the shared belief between team members that it's okay to either take risks, to speak up, to admit mistakes, or to really challenge the status quo, but do all of that without the fear of any sort of judgment or repercussion or punishment. Because I think we've kind of all been in teams where we just don't really speak up because what might happen.
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating because I remember when you told us this the story certainly about the sort of this research into medical teams, and it seemed so counterintuitive. Like, you know, the high performing teams are the ones reporting all these mistakes, and you think, but then of course you suddenly realize, yeah, of course the low performing teams, they're just hiding their mistakes. They're not looking at what's gone wrong. They're not speaking about it. And as soon as you kind of see it like that, it's of course it was like. Yeah, because I'm thinking most of us have probably had some experience, whether within the team or sort of externally. You know, you get sort of a poor customer service or something like that, and you realise that they're not interested in learning from what's gone wrong. They're trying to hide it. They're just trying to cover it. And again, with the Google research that you mentioned, it's sort of the received wisdom is like, we have a very diverse team. We've got, you know, everyone fulfilling the various roles, the different personality types. And actually it's got, it doesn't matter if the team don't trust each other and they don't, they won't speak up and be creative. So I think it's a really sort of fascinating concept, and it you sort of think it seems so obvious when you kind of explain it, but it also seems so sort of like, yeah, it was just hidden and it wasn't what we thought. Could you explain like a little bit more? So we talk about it being sort of you said like the word psychological safety, and you mentioned that sort of manifests itself in being able to report mistakes, being able to be creative. Could you kind of expand on that a little bit and how that sort of works?
Yeah, sure. I think if we all think about our kind of own experiences, there are times that we've maybe known what the right answer is, or we've maybe known what we want to kind of improve, and we've got some really great ideas. But what's happened to us potentially in the past is whenever we've come up with any new ideas or challenged the status quo, we've been shut down. And then if that happens over and over again, it kind of creates a pattern where we just don't want to do it anymore. It's just we're human and we want to protect ourselves. So we don't want to put ourselves out there. So that's what psychological safety is trying to kind of go against, is actually setting an environment where it's okay for people to speak up. But like I said, when you hear about psychological safety, there is a lot of benefits that go along with it. So it's really where if you think about, if you're able to speak up without any judgment and you're able to give your ideas, so it might be about safety concerns, it might be about a process that just needs improving, well, you've got better innovation then. And actually, if you're not scared to speak up with your team members or even project teams that you're in, you've got better collaboration. And ultimately, if you've got all of these different things, your performance in your business is actually going to be even better. And what we also do notice is when teams have low psychological safety, there's things like lower employee engagement. You'll generally notice if you're measuring employee engagement, your turnover of your talent is pretty high. If you're starting to look at your team meetings or just generally the way of working, are people challenging things? Are people asking questions? If you've got a lot of team meetings that are quite silent, you're generally finding that you may have signals of low psychological safety. So yeah, there's lots and lots of benefits, and then there's lots of things that you can look out for.
Yeah, thank you, Shona. Yeah, I think just occurred to me there. We were saying you could have sort of the most qualified person, the best person in theory for the role, but if that person is afraid to say anything or doesn't want to say anything, they're not going to, and it's a waste of time. Then they're not going to put forward their ideas because they don't feel that anyone, well, maybe they don't feel safe, but maybe they just feel, oh, I could put it and I'm just going to be ignored. So what's the point?
Yeah.
It's a really fascinating concept. We've kind of run to the end of time for the first episode. So we're going to have another look in a bit about how this can be practically implemented and how we can make changes within our organizations. So I think I'm really looking forward to getting into the meat of that and how we'll see some real practical examples. But thank you, Shona, for being with us. And
sure.